Welcome back to my top 100 list. Today we're going to be covering games number 51 through 60. And almost all of these are from my midweight shelf, so a lot of moderately complex games on this list. So let's dive right into it. My first game is Pandemic Legacy Season 1. There might be another Pandemic Legacy season on this list. You'll just have to wait to find out. This one I have a lot of fond memories of. I have completed this. I've gone through the entire campaign on this one. I've just kept the box essentially around for decoration. And while it starts as essentially Pandemic, without spoiling anything, it does change into something much more ornate and interesting and complex over the course of the game. Now, I do have mixed feelings because I felt towards the end that I was going to be judged on a certain thing happening that I felt was driven by poor luck at the wrong time, when I was not. So, this is a game with a campaign, and you do win and lose individual games, but there's also the question of how it measures you over the course of the entire campaign. And really, it doesn't answer how it's going to measure you until you finish the entire campaign, and it's at that point that you find out. I thought it was going to go a certain way, and I was really mad about that, but it turned out that it was going another way, which was a little bit less aggravating. So, would I recommend it? Mostly, yes. I think if you are willing to move past the complexity of a gateway level game like base Pandemic and into something more complicated, but do it gradually over the course of multiple sessions, this might be a good way to go. I also feel that it handles the difficulty curve a little bit better than maybe another Pandemic Legacy that I might be talking about at some point soon. I'm not alone in loving this game. This game shot to number 1 on Board Game Geeks, was there for I think a couple of years before being overtaken by Gloomhaven, and even now it's still number 3. So you probably don't need my recommendation, but it is an interesting game to check out. So check this one out, or the red box. That is my number 60, Pandemic Legacy Season 1. By the way, slight addendum to Pandemic Legacy Season 1. It was previously ranked 55 on my list. Its weight is hard to pin down because it changed over the course of the game, but I think at its heaviest it gets to about a 7, and will play 2 to 4 players, although I think you could theoretically play a couple of roles yourself and do it solo if you really wanted to. My number 59 is new to the list. It is Coliseum, and I have the Tasty Minstrel Games version, which is now a defunct publisher as far as I understand. There was also the older Days of Wonder version, which a lot of people seem to prefer as a production overall, but I'm quite happy with the quality of this one, and I appreciate the fact that it has metal coins, even in just the base version of the game. It is new to my list. Its weight is about a 4, and we'll play 3 to 5 players. Okay, so I initially played this at 3 players, and while I love the game, I thought it would just be better with more players. So then I played it with 5 players, and while it was better, you're also running out of shows that you could physically take, and that didn't seem like that should have been part of the decision space, is whether or not you're going to be able to get to actually take a program that you can then put on. It just feels like there should just be more in the game so that you don't run into that problem. So, although I haven't played it, I think the sweet spot is probably playing this at 4. Despite those minor issues, I do think that this is an excellent, maybe just past introductory level game. I do have it on my medium weight shelf, but it's one of those games that is probably straddling the line between the two categories, and these categories are somewhat arbitrary, given that I'm splitting it into 3: lightweight, medium weight, and heavyweight, but you could just as easily split it into 5: light, medium, medium, heavy, and heavy. But for my purposes, I split my shelves into three, and my heavy shelf is right behind me. You can see games that I consider to be heavy. But as back to Coliseum, it's fairly straightforward. You just do a particular thing for this phase. There's a player board that has an outline of what you do in each of those phases. The other side will just give you a list of all the possible programs that you can pick up, which will determine what kind of shows you can put on, and your ability to put on those shows will depend on what kind of resources that you gather. There's a little bit of trading in here. This might be a good sidestep for someone who really likes Catan and needs to be exposed to something else that also might appeal to them on a similar level. I just think it's just a really charming game, and I really would like to play it more. Although maybe I will try to pull it out when I've got specifically 4 players to give it a shot. So that is my number 59, Coliseum. Okay, so I mentioned I might be talking another Pandemic Legacy, but I bet you didn't expect it this soon. This is Pandemic Legacy Season 0, which ends up at 58, 2 spots above Pandemic Legacy Season 1. It is new to my list. Its weight starts at a 4, and we're over halfway in, and it's already to about a 7 out of 10 in terms of weight now. And again, plays 2 to 4 players, but theoretically could be played solo. I actually have some issues with this one. I like it slightly better than Pandemic Legacy, but I think this is too much that they're trying to push at you too quickly. In terms of the amount of things going on in this game, given how fast the legacy elements unfold. So it's just pushing too many rules too quickly to be able to legitimately keep up. Look, one of the benefits of playing games and replaying games is that you can really internalize the rule set. So if I play Terra Mystica, I've played it dozens of times. If I play it again, I can almost go on autopilot because I've played it so many times. This game I've played more than a lot of other games in my collection because I do believe I've played it at least 8 times. And that doesn't happen because the rules keep changing. That's fine, but you have to compensate by making the game lighter and ramp up a little more slowly. This game ramps up too much. I think its weight rating on Board Game Geek is sitting a little over a 3, which is seems absurdly high for a game based on the Pandemic system. Now, it does deviate from the Pandemic system a little bit more than Pandemic Legacy Season 1, and I think that's part of the reason why I like this one better, because Pandemic is decent for me, but it's not a favorite on its own. Vanilla Pandemic, I can think of a lot of other games that I would rather play, despite the fact that I still keep a copy of Pandemic with an expansion thrown in my collection. But I can't deny that the highs in this game are really high, and the lows are mostly, oh, we completely forgot this rule. It's frustrating, because I don't know if we've played, out of those 8 games, the rule set completely right more than maybe 1 or 2 times maximum. But it's got a spy theme. It's got like some interesting sort of developments. The plot is intriguing. I'm kind of interested to see where this is going. It's got a passport system, which is interesting, where you have different special powers attached to different aliases. So depending on which alias you have different abilities. And then you have to sort of manage which one you choose to go to when, and when it's worth spending an action to flip aliases, when it's not. I really do recommend it, but you need someone in your group who is used to handling heavier games. I am, but this is a problem for me, despite the fact that it's in my medium weight shelf, but it's more confusing than 99% of the games that I would put on this shelf, the heavy one. For that reason, it slots lower than it could had it been a little slimmed down. a few things taken out, and new rules been introduced a little bit more gradually than they have been to this point. Maybe I'll feel better about the whole thing once we get through the last 4 or so months that we still have to do. 4 or 5 anyway. But I have a great degree of frustration because I know what this game could have been if it had just been tweaked ever so gently into a simpler, more streamlined package. I still recommend it, but I don't recommend this as widely as I would recommend Pandemic's Legacy Season 1. I'd recommend this more to people who are used to handling heavy games and can shrug their shoulders and just let it roll off their back if they get some rules wrong. If that's you, I think you'll have a terrific time with this. If that's not you, stick with Season 1. We'll see what I feel about Season 2 if we ever get as far as getting that one played. So that is my number 58, Pandemic Legacy Season 0. My number 57 is Factory Funner. Factory Funner is new to my list. Its weight is about a 2, and it plays between 1 and 6 players, although I don't know if I've played the solo mode yet. I think it would be fine based on the design. It would take out the real-time element because you wouldn't be in a rush. But I read over the rules and I think it would be a perfectly satisfactory later solo game. So Factory Funner is a game that I got because I heard that if one was a fan of a game called Ricochet Robots, which is on my list somewhere. I haven't talked about it yet, have I? I'll figure out where it is on my list some other time. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, yeah, haven't talked about that yet, so little sneak peek. Factory Funner is a game in which you are faced with a logistics puzzle of colors and running around pipes. If you like the old PC game, I think it was called Pipe Runner or something along those lines, where you would have to chain together bits and pieces of pipe to try to get it from point A to point B, and eventually it would start flowing, and if your pipes weren't ready, you would have to... it would lose if you couldn't get it all the way to the goal. It's a similar sort of puzzle, only once you've taken a major piece that you're going to add to your puzzle, you have all the time you want to think about how to properly put it in. Now, this does not have a great rule book. It's more like a rule leaflet because it's only 4 pages. I think what happened was they went with the restriction that it had to be a certain size, and as a result, they try to cram in things in a way that doesn't make great intuitive sense for how to teach someone who's trying to learn from that. If you can find another way of learning how to play this, I would recommend finding a video or something else because it's really not great. I didn't realize a major rule where the colored reservoirs that can feed into your pipes, you can't place more than one of the same color on your a board, and as far as I could tell, I couldn't find it in the rulebook. Maybe it's there, but it's formatted so weird that if it is there, it's very easy to miss. So maybe find another way to look it up. And also, this box is absurdly small. There's a reason I have one of these spider bands on this game, because I kind of needed to keep it together because it's bursting at the seams. This is the smallest box that they could have possibly have chosen to put this game in. Despite those minor quibbles, it is an excellent puzzle game that really gets you thinking without hitting you over the head with a high overhead of complex rules. It is fairly simple to teach, but just about anyone who's going to play it is going to have a very thoughtful, intense, contemplative time of that. And I really like that. I really like having the option to have games that will almost be meditative in their nature as you play them. If you aren't a fan of real-time games, I think you still might like this one. I wouldn't recommend Ricochet Robots if you don't like real-time games, because it's real-time for basically the entire time you're playing it, except for between times that people flip up a tile. This one is only one part. There's a real-time element of if there are 4 players, there are going to be 4 tiles put out, and you have to pick one of those 4 tiles. You actually get penalized a little bit if you take first, but if you wait too long, you could have the one that you really need taken out from under you. And so there's that element, But once you do that, you have all the time you want to, as you work on your own board, everyone else works on their own board, and figure out how to actually make the logistics work and get everything to where it needs to be. It's a lovely little puzzle that doesn't take terribly long to learn. Again, find another rule book or find, I don't know if the old one was better. It must have. I'm sure there's a good rules video out there somewhere. I think you'll have a good time with this one. Even if you're a little put off by the real-time element, it's not a huge element. So give this one a try if you're looking for something puzzly and thinky without hitting you with a ton of rules. So that is my number 57 Factory Funner. My number 56 is Champions of Midgard. Champions of Midgard was previously ranked 48th. Its weight is about a 5 out of 10, and it plays 2 to 5 players. Champions of Midgard is a game that is quite... there's quite a bit in this box. This currently houses the base game and 2 expansions. And there are some people that will tell you don't play it without the expansions. I would say I don't think that the expansions would ever be enough to make you go from disliking the game to liking it. I think if you try any version of Champions of Midgard, you're probably good to go to figure out whether or not you like the basic system. But if you do like it, just go ahead and get the expansion because it just makes it better. It mitigates the fact of losing dice, and if that's the major thing that bothers you about the game, okay, maybe the expansion will fix it for you because it gives you compensation for losing your dice, which are your fighters, which you need to defeat monsters, which is your major way of scoring points. It is some ways a very standard worker placement game, almost an introductory level worker placement game. I would still teach Lords of Waterdeep in this category first. If I need something simpler than that, I would probably teach Century: A New World. What else? Those would probably be my go-to ones. But this one is entertaining in the fact that it does bring some like excitement of dice rolling into that sort of system, and I think that's what spices this up for a lot of people. I think a game of this weight sings a little bit more if it just plays cleanly and with pure strategy. I like the dice, but it does add a little bit of, dare I say, bloat to the game that I think is just a little bit cleaner in Lords of Waterdeep, which is why I haven't talked about Lords of Waterdeep yet, and why I'm talking about Champions of Midgard at 56 and not higher on my list. I'm saying this because I feel like I need to compare the two because they occupy a very similar spot. But if you're someone who needs a little bit of that sort of Ameritrash style dice rolling and excitement and uncertainty to really get into a game, this is probably a better bet. If you just want that cleaner, pure Euro game experience, then we'll talk a little bit about why you should check out Lords of Waterdeep when we get to that one. This is still a great game. It looks okay. The art is decent. The play time is reasonable. It takes a decent amount of time, but it's not overwhelming in how long it goes. The expansion is really cool because it gives you a whole new set of things to shop for with your dead dudes. And that's really helpful because if you just get killed really quickly because of bad dice rolls, you're actually given a leg up. It's kind of a catch-up mechanism against the sort of randomness of the dice. So, yeah, give it a try. It's a great game. Do I have other games I like more? Yes, I have exactly 55 games I like more than this one. But it's still a great game. So, give that one a try. That is my number 56, Champions of Midgard. My number 55 is Mission Red Planet. This is the second edition. I do believe you could probably find a first edition copy. And unlike the last game, this one's actually fairly light. Like, there's not a ton in this box. I think this is one of those clear cases where they could have gone with a smaller box, but they went with the larger one to convey the complexity of the game more so than this is how much space you need to store those components. Let me even just open this up for a second. Like, it's not exactly filled to the brim. Okay, so rulebook and about half a box worth of components. So yeah, they could have easily done this in a smaller box for sure. But it's a great game. Complaints about ticket to ride size boxes, as I've heard these referred to before, aside. It's a game that plays very differently depending on whether you're doing a larger player count, so 5 or 6, or something that's a little bit lower, like 3. I would imagine even 2 it's true. 2 players is true, and then you've got your sort of in between player count of 4, which is always sort of the golden mean in playing games. You are playing cards that trigger in a countdown sequence. So you go 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And whenever you get to the number that is the number of the card that you just put out in front of you, everyone has the same card. So the 9 is always the same one for everyone. The 8 is always the same one for everyone. You say a 7, someone flips up their card with a 7 on it. They triggered those effects. They finish putting guys onto the little rocket ships and doing the other special effects on the card. And then they resume the countdown. 6, 5, 4. Someone had a 4. They flip that one up, and then they play that. The thing is, a lot of these cards are doing things that can get screwed up easily. There's one that lets you put 3 guys onto a single ship, but only if there's room, and it's low enough in the countdown space that something can happen before that significantly messes up the person's chance to actually get that triggered. So there's that. It gets more chaotic at higher player counts. So the 5 or 6 players, as I mentioned, I've only played this at 5. I've played it at 5 a couple times, and I believe I played it at 3 a couple of times. 5 is very chaotic. Never played it at 4, actually, now that I think about it. 5 is very chaotic. There's a lot of unpredictability. You just kind of have to sit back and watch the game almost play itself. It's entertaining because you're invested, because you're making choices. But it reminds me a lot of the experience I had when I was just starting to get into games of playing Killer Bunnies and going, I want to win, but oh wow. Just watch this chaos is entertainment enough. I get that element. But 3, it's much more tactical. You can do a lot more thinking about, if they do this, then I will do this other thing. And then I could possibly get this triggered. And there's just a lot more of a chance to do the sort of outthinking. So I prefer this at lower player counts. But I could be persuaded, if I'm in the right mood, to want to play this at 5 or 6 players. I would just be prepared for having very little control of my own destiny in the result of the game. And usually it's a negative to me, but I just find the theme of this one, this sort of steampunk exploration of Mars, the way that what you're trying to do is get these guys onto Mars itself, and possibly onto its moon, wanting to do that, but having these very indirect means of accomplishing that based on the cards and when they trigger, to be a really intriguing little puzzle. And there's just a lot of unexpected things that happen along the way. So it's very entertaining. I think it's too random, especially at higher player counts, to ever really crack my top 20 or 30 games. But I do like it quite a bit for what it is. And so that's why it ends up sitting at my number 55 spot, where it was previously ranked at 52, so barely moved at all. Weight is about a 5. And I'll play 3 to 6 players. Does it say 2 players on the box? It does. Okay. I don't know. I don't know if 2 players would work. But at least at 3, that's a good player count. So that is my number 55 mission, Red Planet. My number 54 is a game I've had on the list for quite a while. It is Power Grid. And oh, that's a little bump there. Unfortunate. Power Grid is previously ranked at 33. It's dropped a little bit. Its weight is about a 7. I have this sort of as one of those borderline games that I could put either on my medium weight or my heavyweight shelf. It's a medium-heavy game, and we'll play between 3 to 6 players. I technically plays 2. I wouldn't try to play it at 2. Power Grid is a game that I've been playing for a long time. It is a game that I first played in, I believe, 2015, because I remember it being one of the games that I introduced myself to when I was taking a game design course. They asked you to play some games as sort of a games literacy program, games literacy portion of the course, and I really liked it ever since then. It's a game that has a few components of the rules that are hard to remember, and that I have to look up every time I want to play. Specifically, how different steps trigger and what to do specifically when a certain step triggers. And then, of course, the setup information is going to be very different depending on the number of players. But other than that, the core gameplay, if you're just sitting down to play with someone who knows the game well or has already gone through the rulebook and refreshed themselves on the stuff, you just remember, you bid, you take your money, you bid, then you buy resources at whatever the turn order says you should buy it at, and you want to buy sooner than later, because if people buy like 5 coal, then your coal is going to be 5 spaces along it more expensive than everyone else's, and then you get cities that you can power up. So it's the actual gameplay loop of it is very straightforward. It's just essentially 3 different mini games that you need to know how they work in order to play the game successfully. But the interdependence of them and how it ultimately boils down to a game of money management in all 3 of those phases is really interesting, and it plays out very differently depending on how aggressive players are in bidding, how where they're trying to make their mark on the map. It's just an intriguing system, and it ultimately comes down to, do you have the resources on enough places on the map to power to win the game? And then if you're tied, then it comes down to money. So it's a great heavier Euro game. I wouldn't put this in the weight class of some of the heaviest Euro games that I have or play, but it is quite a bit of fun, and I think it's only really slipped for me because I just haven't gotten around to getting it played as often lately. Although it is a heavier Euro game that plays 6 players fairly comfortably, which is relatively rare. So who knows? Maybe I'll make it a point to play this with some board gaming muggles sometime soon. Very strong game. If you want to sample a heavier strategy Euro game, this is a pretty good option for that. And I think it's been around for long enough that you're going to have a pretty easy time finding a copy to play. So that, in fact, if you want, I'm currently selling a copy. So contact me if you want to pay like 30 to 40 Canadian dollars to have your own copy of Power Grid. That is my number 54, Power Grid. My number 53 is Race for the Galaxy. Race for the Galaxy is previously ranked at 83, so it's shot up the list quite a bit. Its weight is about a 6, and it is 2 to 4 players. So the weight rating of me putting out a 6 comes with a giant asterisk. It is not an incredibly dense rule set. It is an incredibly dense set of icons. This is notoriously the banner bearer for having a slew of icons that mean something, apparently. And often it's with like no text to explain the word. Sometimes the text is there, sometimes it is not. And if you find that swimming in a sea of symbols is a difficult time for you, you're probably going to have a hard time with this. The thing is, if you can get that under your belt, the gameplay can be very fast and deep without bogging you down with a whole ton of rules. It is effective at being an efficiency puzzle that plays very quickly despite being moderately complex. It certainly punches above its weight in terms of how much game it feels like there is there for how dense the rule set is. Like, this is a smaller box, and even this smaller box is probably too much for just the base game. Just to give you an idea, this is the rule book. It's not huge. It's using up a lot of... It has a lot of empty space in it. But it's really only about 8 pages of not a huge amount of text. And then it's just icons, icons, icons. Just the last few pages. And these are your player aids. Like, just look at that. So much information on there. So again, there are some rules to consider. It is not a lightweight game. I wouldn't put it on that shelf. But it is certainly a lot of information being crammed into the iconography, which makes it something I like to call more confusing than complex, which describes a lot of my games. And there are games that are more complex than they are confusing. I consider Terra Mystica to be one of those games because I can teach it and people seem to grasp it, even though it's a lot of information at once. But this one's the other end of that spectrum, which is it's more confusing than the objective number of actual rules that you have to deal with. So that is my number. What was my number? That was my number 53, Race for the Galaxy. My number 52 is Smartphone Inc. Smartphone Inc. is new to the list. Its weight is about a 5, and I would play it at 3 to 5 players. Smartphone Inc. is a game I've played 3 and 4 players, but I think it's probably going to be best at 5 because the game gets better as you get in each other's way more, and I think that's going to happen most often at a 5-player count. I don't think the extra time is going to be significant. It says it's a 90-minute game. I think that's not too off of reality for being a time on a box. That this is probably a 90-minute to a 2-hour game if people are relatively new. The game just is divided in several phases. It's got this really interesting core mechanism where you're overlaying tiles on top of each other, and depending on how you do it, you get different benefits. If you make your 2 main pieces overlap each other more, you get more of a certain benefit. If you overlap them less, you get less of that certain benefit, but it exposes more pictures on top of these tiles, which means you get more of those benefits. And then they're also double-sided, so there's a set of symbols on this side that are completely different than the set of symbols on this side, and likewise for the other tile. And then you get smaller tiles that you can add on top of them to give you even more different options. It is an economic game with a really curiously tight economy. Everything is done in order of lowest price to highest price, and if you are at the same price level, then lowest point total to highest point total among those that are tied for price. And that really matters because higher prices can potentially get you more points at the end of the round, but that can also lead to you not being able to sell certain amounts or letting other people get the jump on you with their lower priced products that can cut into places that you were planning to sell things. It's really interactive and tight and interesting and feels like a game that has a whole lot more going on than the actual number of rules that are involved. And I think this is sort of fast becoming a go-to medium weight game to show to people to try to get them interested in gaming. I just really think this design is incredibly clever and interesting, and props for any game that has a multiplication table on the inside of your player shield. If only every player shield had multiplication tables on it, then the world would be a better place. I really like this one. I don't know if I can pitch it well, and I don't know if you Google the pictures of the board to see what it looks like, if that's going to really sell you on it either. I think you just kind of have to take my word for this, that this is an excellent and interesting and deeply interactive game that is going to engage you as long as you are willing to give it a shot. So give it a shot with at least 3 players. So that is my number 52, Smartphone Inc. 8 of the last 9 games being from my medium weight shelf. Here's one that is so far lodged onto the shelf, which is actually right there. You see that spot right there? Right there? That is where Mage Knight board game. Every time I say that title, I really think it sounds like a mistake. Like it should be called Mage Knight the Board Game, not Mage Knight Board Game. Or at least called the Mage Knight Board Game. But instead it's called Mage Knight Board Game. You can even see it in the title. See? Vlad Shvatel, that's the designer. Mage Knight Board Game. That's the entire title. Anyways, previous rank was 38. Its weight is a 10. This is incredibly complex. Don't be deceived by the fact that this is a modest-sized box. And it plays 1 or 2 players. I would have to be out of my mind to play this with 3 or 4. Or just have a lot of time to kill. Okay, so this is more so than any game in my collection, primarily existing as a solo experience for me. There are other games that I play a lot solo. I've started playing Terra Mystica a lot solo, which is not surprising given that it's my favorite game. Whoops, spoiler. I've played other ones. I've played a decent number of games of Spirit Island solo. But a Spirit Island, I would more easily get to the table and get it played solo than this one. The primary problem is that this game has 2 20-page rule books, which I will show you. One of which is Learn to Play, and the other of which is the rules reference. So, after you've gone through the game walkthrough, and this is large pages filled with very tiny text, yes, some occasional images, that's nice, this is still 20 pages. That's a pretty decent sized rule book, if that was all there was. But there's 2 of them. Some of this information is redundant, but this is the one that that is actually designed to be read straight through, which is how I normally go through rule books to try to figure out what's going on. This one is just mostly rules reference, so it gives you an index at the beginning. Do I want to look up interacting with locals? Okay, that's page 7. So I go to page 7, interacting with locals. There's half a page there. But this is fairly obtuse stuff. And then so I'm looking at here, and here's stuff is like, in a red city, you can buy artifacts for 12 influence points each. The artifact is drawn at the end of the turn as if you won them in combat. Okay. In the blue city, you can buy spells if you are... But buy spells as if you are in a mage tower. Okay. Do I have to now look up how mage towers work? Yes, you do. there are just so many rules that are very specific. It does give you a bunch of reference cards, which are a godsend. So I can look up at a glance the basic rules for, okay, they're monster grounds, a monster den. How does that work? I haven't fought something in there for quite some time. Maybe I remember how to interact in a village, how to do things in a village or a monastery, because I encountered those more. But do I remember how to do it in a village? In a monster den? Do I remember that it has to be as if it was at night when I go into a dungeon? Who's going to remember this stuff? The only way I think to remember it is to play this game as a lifestyle game. And I am this short of being willing to do that. I like this game a lot. It's barely outside of my top 50. It could easily get back in. I just played this past week solo, and I had a great time. It's an RPG experience, the likes of which that you would spend 40, 50, 60 hours on a computer or on a game console, condensed into 2 to 4 hours. And it can be glorious, and it is so frustrating when you lose, but it's frustrating because you care so much. It is a terrific game that I would recommend to almost nobody. You have to have a deranged mindset, which I fully acknowledge that this is a deranged mindset that I have. A deranged mindset that complexity is good. The more complex, the better. Almost no one thinks like this. The people who do probably already play Mage Knight daily. But I don't quite get there because I still don't want to play this more than like maybe a couple of times a month. And so I know if I'm going to play it, yes, I remember like 85 to 90% of the rules, but there's always that 10 to 15% that I still don't remember, because you have to be playing it like multiple times a week to be able to remember, oh, night rules apply in a dungeon, and you just remember all these minor technicalities. Fun fact, this is a game that you can play solo, cooperatively, competitively, and on specific scenarios, which I believe the scenarios will sometimes let you play specifically cooperatively or competitively, but I'm not 100% sure on that. This is one of those games that has that kind of flexibility. It was one of the early games that did that before every game on Kickstarter was like, okay, we're going to do cooperative, competitive, solo, and semi-co-op as like a whole menu of gaming options. I think this one actually does it fine. I've played this cooperatively. I could see playing it competitively, but that would require me to learn the player versus player combat rules, and oh my dear, sweet, merciful Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Combat with enemies. This is combat with enemies. On this page, and this page, and this page, so basically 2 full pages. And then another, like, page and a bit. This player versus player combat. In that tiny print that I would have to learn if I was to try to play this competitively. This game is insanely long solo. I wouldn't even consider trying to play this at 3 players. If I'm going to play it with another player, I'm playing it with one other player. Look, don't play Mage Knight. almost everyone who's going to genuinely enjoy Mage Knight is already playing Mage Knight. I'm sort of a weird fringe case where I really like the game, but not to the point where I'm so infatuated with it that I build my life around Mage Knight. Mage Knight comes first, then maybe God, and then possibly my family. No, not quite there. But if I haven't dissuaded you from playing this game, if your ears actually perked up when I said it had two 20-page rule books with small print rules, tons of little technicalities, and, well, first off, you're probably a lawyer, because what else would you be doing for a living? And second off, okay, maybe it's for you. I just think that the audience who that describes is so vanishingly small that it's remarkable that this game has any kind of following online. It's ranked highly on Board Game Geek because these kinds of sickos, and I put myself firmly in that category, are also going to be the people who have accounts on Board Game Geek. There's no way they're not. You know, they gotta be expressing their opinion, and they're upvoting every heavy Euro and 4-hour Ameritrash game and saying that these are the best gaming experiences, and it's why those games rise to the top and not even games that do very well like Azul or Ticket to Ride, which I think are massively more appealing. If you watch the review that Paul from who used to be one of the reviewers on Shut Up and Sit Down did for Kingdom Death Monster, and instead of this big massive campaign, you just imagined a game that was, as he described it, kind of like those old progressive rock albums that are very niche at this point. This game is maybe in that category. And if his descriptions of that game strike you, but you would want something that's maybe extravagant on the rules and the experience and the length, but maybe a little bit more focused on the gameplay loop of rewarding you with just endorphins as you hit these milestones and collect these things and level up, Mage Knight might be for you. But for everyone else, just play almost any other game on my list. No, literally. I think for 90% of the people who would have any interest in playing games and playing a lot of games, and I'm limiting this to people who are interested in board games and have an enthusiasm for that. Not necessarily diehard gamers only, but at least people who have a deep interest in playing more and learning more about board games and enjoying more board games. If that describes you, 90% of you still will not like Mage Knight, and the vast majority of you will just bounce off the rules if you try to play it. If you try to get your own copy and you try to learn how to play it and give it a shot. But for that 10% who really want to play games and are attracted by the idea of extravagant complexity, it really is an amazing design. It's not perfect, but the things it does well are done so well that it's almost unparalleled in terms of the 500 or so games that I've played in my lifetime. I'm looking at the the time count for my talk about this game, and I'm realizing that this is almost long enough to be its own video. So I better wrap it there. Mage Knight, don't play it. Unless you're a self-identified sicko like me, and then maybe you'll think it's amazing. But really, yeah, don't play it, most of you. I think I've spoken long enough that you should understand whether or not the game is for you. Just be cautious. Wow, okay, so, I'm sorry the last one ran so long, but I have feelings about that one. And honestly, that's why a lot of the higher portions of my list skew towards heavier games, is because they are the ones that inspire the most passion. And when I think that they're on, they are so on that I am ready to talk about them for a considerable length of time. These are all great games. I love all of these games. I would be extremely pleased to be able to play any one of these. It's just that 9 out of the 10 of them, I would be happy to play with you. And I'm just going to go find a corner of the basement to play Mage Knight by myself, because I don't know if I want to actually bring other people into that game. But there you have it. 9 out of 10 games that I wholeheartedly recommend to certain groups of people, and one game I will keep playing possibly until I die, despite the fact that it is one of the most insane feats I've seen in game design to date. So, thank you for watching. I will catch you on the next one.